Okay, let's get started. It's 8:01. Cool. So welcome back, everybody. This is the last class of the course. Um, yeah, there's only 6 courses left, so we're definitely going to finish the book this class. So just to give a quick refresher to some stuff that we learned last week, I sent out a message as well. So we got this idea. I guess we're starting to talk about the experiences of a realized person. What are they going to do? How do they feel? All of that, and then we started talking about what happens once we realize what the final goal is. We stop seeing differences in this world. Everything becomes like a living reality. Everything, even though it appears diverse, is nothing but Brahman. So the substratum. So we start to identify with the substratum, which is the context, rather than the stuff in it, because whatever is in it is going to change and come and go, and it's constantly shifting and changing. But the context in which all of it is happening is always the same, which is that it's conscious. And it always helps to kind of bring ourselves back and have a direct experience of it. So it's always the question my teacher also asks is like, who sees this cup? And we always have to remember that, oh, I see the cup. And that direct seeing, that is the self. Like, you are experiencing the self at every moment. Every moment we are awareing, we are illumining things. But what we are illumining is going to be different. And what happens is we tend to identify with the things that is being illumined. So if I'm having a shitty day, I say I am having a shitty day. But actually what is happening is, shittiness is being illumined, right? Like my mind is kind of, very noisy, or I'm feeling low energy, or whatever it is that is making you feel shitty, or like somebody else is being, mean to you. All of those things are things which are being illumined. But what we do is we attribute to me stuff that I see. So, so what this is saying is that once we start identifying with the awareness, or the stuff that allows us to see things, then no matter what we see, it'll just be an appearance, or like it will just be an experience which is temporary, because we know every experience is temporary. And even though the experience may not be nice, we may not enjoy it, but we can get through it, because it's just something that's passing. It's like the wind. It's like the weather, right? Sometimes we have good weather, sometimes we have shitty weather, but we don't get completely identified with the weather. We know that it's not me as such. So whenever we are having a shitty day, we can say, oh, the weather is not very great today. So we can start to live the world, be in the world, but not get tormented by it. And that's sort of the stage that we want to reach. And then once we reach there, then we can play with things, because what we really want, we already have. And that's what we sort of started again to in the last verses, which is whatever is worth getting, whatever we want to strive for, this Brahman is it. Realizing that you are that, which is something that we want all the time. We're always looking, either looking for hedonistic pleasure, just satisfying desires. We're looking for recognition. We're looking for fame. We're looking for all these things, looking for wealth. But when we see that when we get all of those things, how are we going to feel? We're going to have a taste of our own self. So once we get this, once we reach there, and once we have that experience that I am blissful and satisfied at all times, then I can do things that make me happy in terms of like work and stuff. Like things stop becoming compulsive and start to become a form of expression, where I can start to see what is it that I really want to do in life. What is it that how can I sort of participate in this world in a way that, aligns with my, the word we use is swadharma, which is myself, like my path of action, like something that calls to me. And how do I sort of align myself to those things? And that shift starts to happen automatically, because our attention on useless things starts to fade, right now our attention is scattered in all different directions, and we're not able to sort of really focus in one single direction. So our ability to, have single pointed attention starts to manifest. And because that starts to manifest, things start to move in that direction. So we just start to, so, in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, which is, something that I'm thinking of doing, which is the Karma Yoga course. They say that, doing this work makes you the master of this world and the beyond, which is, you become a master of, your day-to-day, your worldly, I would say, like, duties and things that we have to do. Like, so if we have to work, we have to be good at working. So we start to become masters in every aspect of life, and we become masters of the beyond, which is, we realize that even though we experience this world, we are not really from it. So that's kind of where we are at with this, and we are talking about what would happen once we realize Brahman, and we're talking about what Brahman is. So for the first part of the book, we spoke about what the Atman is. The Atman is the self within, and now we're talking more about Brahman. So so the questions we answer in this work is, who am I? We want to answer that question first. Is who am I? What am I? Am I this body? Am I this limited piece of material that I gather? Am I just my mental personality, which is also a gathering? I gather it based on having different experiences. It changes. I become woke when I have experiences that make me woke. I become I would say little gross when I watch like a news alert, where when we watch Fox News or we watch like all these sort of very conservative news, our mind becomes affected by it. So, we start to believe ideas because we hear them continuously, right? So, but realizing that the mind is also something that's changing constantly. So we are definitely not the mind as well. We're not the body, we're not the mind. So we are something beyond the mind and body. And that's the initial process, which is I'm trying to get to my core of my being. Like, who am I really? So once we get there, that is one step in the process. So, that's realizing the Atman. But then the next step is, once I know who I am, then we have to see what is this world? Because, we still have to interact with this world. We still have to be in this world. And then the answer to that question from this work is, it is Brahman. And its meaning is that it's not different than the Atman. So the Atman is this, conscious, divine spark within us, which allows us to experience this world, right? Like the sense of awareness that we are. And Brahman is this basically extrapolating that to the entire world. So, our own sense of limited subjective world exists in my Atman. So, I have an Atman which allows me to sort of experience this world. You have the same Atman which allows you to experience this world. But there is this Brahman, which is the combination of all of those things, in which the world sort of exists. So, so you can say that, there's this space of consciousness, and in that space of consciousness, it's very easy to understand when you look at our own sort of, let's say, a dream world, which is, in my space of consciousness, my entire dream world exists. So I have my dream body, I have like characters in that dream, I have an entire universe in that dream, and I dream and it feels very real. But that entire world was nothing but my mind appearing as that world, right? Because when I wake up, all of it kind of like immediately stops. So it all goes back into me. And it came out of me and it goes back into me. So there is this context, or like this substratum, in which all of those things exist and we experience those things. And what this work is saying, that this world is also kind of like that. The difference is that, I am the god of my dream, where I am the central character. Like, this entire world is created, the entire dream world is created by me and is destroyed by me. But in this world, it's not like that, right? Like, when I go, this world does like changes a little bit, but it doesn't completely disappear, right? Because let's say I no longer exist. Somebody like my friends will still experience this world, or you will still experience this world. But this entire world is a shared dream, which means that the actions that I do will affect the experience of this dream. actions that you do will affect this dream. And if when you go out of existence, this world slightly changes, or this dream slightly changes. And if I go out of experience, this dream will slightly change. And if a new life comes into existence, this world slightly changes as well. So because of the, I would say, efforts and the ideas and desires of all individual beings in this world is what it is. And moment all the desires end, this world will also kind of end. And what this work is saying is that Brahman is the word we use to describe the totality of it all. And the divine spark that is within us is the same spark that is within you, within me, within somebody else, within a plant, within an animal. All of them have that divine spark, which is called life. And that allows us to, have experiences, allows us to, we are slightly more developed, I would say, in terms of our body. So we have a more complex body. Animals have a slightly lesser complex body. Plants have even lesser, but that's just their equipment. Their equipment is different. But the spark in them is the same, which is why, when we go to, like, I don't know if you've had experiences where you go to like a walk in nature and you can kind of feel the plant, even though, or like there's a huge tree and you can sort of like, it almost feels like you're communicating with the tree or they're communicating with you, even though they don't have, a mouth to actually be able to talk or like, but there is this sort of, they have some physical body, right? They have like a tree trunk and like branches and like leaves and stuff. And that is the way they are sort of, that is their limited sort of body that they have. But they have a divine same Atman as well in them, which allows them to experience the plant and have their own set of experiences. But my point is that the same spark is in them as well. And once we start to get a taste of our own self's nature and we start to like not identify with the mind so much, we can sort of experience this sort of divineness continuously, because this is always there within us. And because we can experience our own Atman, we will start to experience other people's Atman, because it's not different. It is literally the same. And so we can start to experience and communicate with like every living being outside. And that's where, the sense of difference and all of that breaks down. So this is getting into a little woo-woo stuff, but that is a consequence of this work. It is going to start to happen. And I think we're getting into, in the previous verses, we started to talk about, what would happen once we realize Brahman. And I think we're continuing down that journey. So does anyone have any questions about anything that came up last week, or any thoughts about this? Okay, so let's continue. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Cool. Would anyone like to read the Sanskrit today?
Can I try?
Sure. Awesome. Sanjana, go for it. And would anyone like to read the English?
I can
read the English.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, Priya, go for it. So we are on verse 63. You can, if you have a book, you can use that, or you can use the screen. Sanjana, go for it.
Yeah. Jagat vilakshanam brahman brahmano anyanna kinchana brahmanya bhyati sen chinmitya yata maru marichika.
Wow, wonderful.
Yeah, nice, Sandhana.
Thank you.
Brahman is other than the universe. There exists nothing whatsoever that is not Brahman. If any object other than Brahman appears to exist, it is unreal, like the mirage.
Okay, so here, this is kind of expanding on what I was trying to indicate, which is that, so if Brahman is the word that we use to describe the material cause of everything, which is, before the Big Bang, there was nothing. But actually, that's not true. There was Brahman before the Big Bang. And from the Big Bang came this entire universe sort of came out of, and it came from nothing, right? That's even the scientific world actually says that, which is there was this moment where this universe it appeared out of nothingness. And here we're giving an explanation of like what is the material cause of this world, which is, it is Brahman. And even though, through combination and all of that, it changes, like atoms become combined with each other, become like more complex, and we have this diverse world. But it is nothing but Brahman. And name and form is something we sort of use as a convenience to communicate. We say, okay, this is a door, and this is a table, and this is a wall, and this is like a floor, right? Like these are all words we use, which is good for communication and makes us easy to transact. But our understanding is that it is nothing but Brahman. So, the analogy that we can try to use is that in our own direct experience, when we think of any thought, right? I can think of, again, I'm going to say mangoes. If you think of mangoes, what is the material cause for it? It's nothing but stuff, mind stuff, you can say, right? Like even that is just language we're using. We can try to distinguish and say, no, it's my mind, but it's nothing but me, right? Like there is, I create it, it exists for a while in my experience, and then it disappears in my experience. So in every experience, we have like, the subject, the object, and the experience. And in the case of when I'm thinking, all three of those things are just me. I am the subject experiencing my own thoughts, and I'm experiencing me only. So, in that, there's in that, whenever I'm thinking, this entire experience is, there's like a unity that there's only me. I'm experiencing myself in those moments, which is pretty cool if you think about it. Like there's nothing else. I don't need anybody outside of, anybody in quotes, which is there is nothing other than me that is happening in those moments, which is I am creating a thought. So, the thought is nothing but me, and I am experiencing it. So there's like I all the time. So in those moments, nothing exists outside of that. And here, if we extrapolate that to this entire world, it's like this entire world is also Brahman. It appears as a plant, it appears as another human being. So just like I can say that the thoughts that I have, I can say that I had a thought, but it was nothing but me. And I can say that, through convenience, I can say, yes, it was a thought about this, it was a thought about that. But in reality, it's nothing but me. Like I am having the thought. Why? Because I've had previous experiences that led me to have that thought, right? It's like, it's not something that I'm creating magically out of like I don't need to eat a mango to actually have a thought about a mango. Like it's just like it just happens, and that's the beauty of the Atman and the beauty of Brahman, which is that it can just morph into whatever it can, whatever you have. It's almost like we are gods in that way, that I can think. I have the ability to create ideas and things and manifest things in my mind, and that same power is used to manifest things in this world. It's just that things in this world are, there has been a little bit more energy to create those things in the world, as opposed to something in my mind, because I can think of a beautiful castle and in like very fine detail, and that's very easy to do because it requires no real sort of material other than just thinking about it. But if I want to translate that into the real world, I will need physical, bricks and energy and like people and coordination and all of that. But it's kind of the same idea, which is, in order to manifest anything, I need to put in some energy. And that energy is a lot more in the outer world and is a little bit lesser in our own minds. So here, the verse is saying that there's nothing outside of Brahman. Because if Brahman is the context in which everything is, and if Brahman is the material cause out of which things appear, they exist for a while and they go back, there cannot be anything outside of Brahman. Like even like if we were to hypothetically say there is a place in this galaxy where, we haven't gone there before, like it's unexplored, that is outside of Brahman. But that doesn't make sense, because the moment we go there, it is within Brahman again. Because all of our individual experiences, everything is within this certain context in which they appear. So what this is actually, the subtler meaning is that even space, like even like this entire space in which this universe exists, even that is within Brahman. So you can think of like Brahman as the outermost, I would say, something that pervades this entire universe. So just like I pervade this entire body, like there's no part of my body which I can say is not me, right? I can say that for convenience, I can say this is my left hand, this is my right hand, but I wouldn't say my left hand is more me than my right hand. Like it's equally me. And there's nothing, no part of my body which is kind of outside, or at least my physical body, which is outside of this structure. So that's kind of like the same idea where, and you know, the example that we use is the mirage in the water. You know, that's the very famous example where, you know, in the beginning, when I see that you know, when I'm driving my car and, you know, it's a hot day, and then, you know, as kids, when we're looking out of the window, you're like, mommy, look, there's water in the distance. And then, you know, everyone is like really surprised and like, wow, there's water here, so beautiful. But then, you know, we keep seeing it, it never gets closer. And after a moment, we realize that actually it wasn't water. Like it's mirage. It's like the mind is playing a trick on you, which is, even though it looks like water, uh, definitely, you know, our senses are reporting that it's water. The mind is interpreting it as water. But then after some time, we have this realization that, wait a second, this is not water. It's just the play of like heat waves and like reflection. Uh, and then our mind has the knowledge that, okay, this is no longer water. But that doesn't mean that the senses stop reporting it as water. So the senses will still report it as water. It'll still look like water. It'll still be reflective. But now our deep understanding is that it is mirage. So we will never be fooled by it, even though it appears as water. So this is kind of the same idea, which is this entire world is Brahman. And even though it appears diverse, even though it looks like, you know, varied, and we are full of experiences, lots of highs, lots of lows, but it's nothing but Brahman appearing as all of those things. Um, and once we understand that, like I would say, then the next question would be, so what? What's the big deal? It's all Brahman, yay, and it doesn't make any difference to my life. Actually, it kind of does, because once we can see that it's all just a play of consciousness, then our involvement will still be the same. We can still be involved with the world, but our sense of how it should be in a particular way starts to lessen. And that's where our issues are. Our sense of control, our sense of not accepting life for what life is, you know, the phrase is like not accepting life on life's terms. Those things will start to lessen. And once those things starts to lessen, then you know, the storehouse of like unresolved emotion and energy just starts to bubble up, because it starts to we no longer start to suppress things, because we can say, okay, I can deal with whatever energy, whatever discomfort, whatever is within me, and I can start to process them. And what will start to happen in our lives is that uh, from the past, or like, I mean, I don't even know if it's fair to say from the past, but from somewhere, uh, all kinds of crazy things will start to happen, which is, you know, maybe you'll start to feel extremely sad, you'll start to feel extremely joyful, you'll almost feel like we're having a psychotic breakdown. But what's actually happening is that we are no longer like, you know, we have this gate within us where we hold on and say, no, I don't want to open that out. But once we see that, okay, opening, closing doesn't matter, it's just all consciousness, we allow ourselves for like stuff to start energy to start moving through our bodies. And once that starts to happen, then automatically we start to get healed, and things start to move, and resolution starts to happen. Um, and that sort of gives us this ability to sort of engage with this world without really caring about what the outcome is, because, or I wouldn't say so much so as caring, but not being hell-bent that this outcome should be this way, even though we may still have goals and desires and all these things, but we are become more process oriented rather than outcome oriented. And that's sort of the benefit of this teaching. Any questions about this? I think I went on a big tangent here, but this is important, because the question is always that, so what? Why do I care about this, and how does this affect my life? And the answer is that once we stop paying attention and stop being fearful of our own self, because this entire world is nothing but me. Things are happening to me because on some deep conscious level, this is what I need to sort of break out of this sort of mind that is holding me back. And instead of sort of resisting things, if we can sort of accept them and make it part of us, and sort of move past it, we will, the thickness of mind will start to thin. And once the mind starts to thin, the self shines through constantly. And once the self is shining through and we can see that and clearly see that the self is shining through, then behind any action, behind any project or whatever, there is this constant sense of bliss that's available to us. So no matter how deeply we are engaged in this world, we will still be satisfied. And that's like I would say that's the best thing that we can, at least I cannot speak for anybody else, but if speaking from my own experience, I can say that's the best thing that has ever happened. And is a great, like, what else? I wouldn't, let's say this, I wouldn't trade that for anything. If I were to ask me, if you were to give me like $100 million or like this, I would say, I don't care about that. Because even if I get the $100 million, my sense of, the fears and the knots that my mind has will still be there. Because even after you get whatever you want, if we haven't dealt with the fundamental issue of our fears and desires and all of those things, then even though we get whatever we want, that is still going to be available. I mean, those desires are still going to be there, and those fears are still going to be there. So what we want is not what our limited mind is presenting to us. Our limited mind presents to us and says, I want, to go on the best vacation. I want my, boss to love me. I want to be very respected at work. I want to be famous, or whatever it is that we want to do. Our limited mind presents these ideas because from our past experiences, we have analyzed the world and we have said, these are the things which are important, or the world has given us those ideas. But when we get those things, we now, satisfying those desires do not lead to no more desires. What actually ends up happening is whenever we satisfy desires, we want more. We want more. It's like, this inherent need. And that's what makes us human, which is, nothing, there's no limit to where we can sort of go, right? Any animal, any other creature has a limit. They want something, they want food, or they want they want a family or whatever, and that's it. That's the end of their seeking. But for human beings, we can go beyond. It's like we are masters of this world, we want to go to another planet. We're masters of that planet, we want to go to another galaxy. So there's no end to what we can achieve in terms of like technological advancements and stuff. But if that's where we find our sort of sense of joy in, like, if those things aren't there, then I will not be happy. If we have this sort of dependent, I would say, dependence, then nothing is going to satisfy us, because we are not what's the word? Once we satisfy desires, that doesn't result in reducing the desires. It ends up increasing the desires. And it doesn't change the fact or our belief that satisfaction of desires is where happiness is. Because that is the fundamental problem, which is we think that satisfying a desire will make me happy, which is no doubt true, which we do feel happy when desires get satisfied, but that's not why we feel happy. it's slightly flipped, which is we feel actually happy because once we satisfy a desire, no, our mind, we have come home. We are no longer thinking about the stuff we don't have for a few moments, because we are enjoying the desires that has just completed right now, and we are, really happy, and we are only focused on that. So if we just have that basic understanding, which is satisfying desires makes me happy, but when I satisfy desires, the self is shining through, and not that the object of desire was a cause of my happiness. If we can get that basic idea, then all of this becomes like a consequence of that. Okay. I think I said way more than I wanted to with this one, but any questions about this?
I have a question. So
Sure.
I kind of understand how I'm able to intuitively understand how this applies to non-extreme events, like a bad day at
Mm-hmm.
work, or you don't like your boss, or you can't buy a car when you thought you could. But what does this work say for extremely positive or extremely negative events, like going through a Holocaust, or going through trauma, or on the flip side, extremely positive events where you
Yeah.
do a little bit of something and you like win the lottery, or things go wildly well for you?
Yeah.
How what does this work say about how you can remain, how can you not get swept away in the extremes,
Yeah.
and still understand that who you are and what Brahman is in that time?
Yeah. So I would say this work says that um, this work is easiest to be done when we are in the human realm, which means that we have like three realms, which is like the hell realm, the human realm, and the heaven realm. And that doesn't literally mean locations, it just means places in life. So in a hell realm, you could be like, you're in a war zone, you're in the Holocaust, and in that place it's impossible to do this work, because your day to day just becomes about survival, and like you don't even have the time and space to even have the thought about like what is beyond this world. So it's very hard to do this work if you're in that realm. In the heaven realm, it's like the opposite. I have so much joy and so much happiness that why would I even think that there is something worth beyond this? I'm like, my life is pretty good, I don't care, right? So that's the heaven realm. The human realm is the realm where I've got some successes in life, but I've definitely got failures in life. I've got some successes, so it's like the cycle that sometimes my life is great, but then I get some red lights, I get some green lights, and then we start to wonder, is that all life is, which is red lights and green lights, red light? Is there something beyond? So when we are at that point, that's when this work is most applicable, because then our belief in the world sort of isn't so strong. In the cases of hell and heaven, the belief that the world has joy producing properties is extremely high. And we need to get to the human realm for this work to be even something that is desirable. So to answer your question, when you're in those states, it's very hard. But if you've had those states in the past, and you're not having it right now, you're in the human realm, because right, the trauma and things like that is basically, what does it mean? It's our inability to deal with what happened in the past. Yeah, even in those moments, right? In the moments of like hell, and we're still sort of holding on to those moments, and like and it's become sort of this load that we don't know how to deal with. And some of these tools will help with that, and there's also lots of other tools that you can use. But we want to get to the human realm, which is, okay, I know for a fact that this world has, I've tasted this world, it's pretty okay, it's okay, but it's not satisfying in the sense like this. It cannot give me permanent peace, and what we're looking for is permanent peace. Like, give me something that I don't need anything after getting it. Like, is there something in this world? And that's the question we tend to ask, right? Like, what is the point, right? Like, those are like questions when a lot of us ask ourselves, what is the point of existence? What is the point of life? Why am I here? All of those questions. And this work is saying that once you get there, you don't need anything else. Those questions itself drop, because those questions come from a place of poverty. And here it's saying, and poverty here doesn't mean like wealth, like physical wealth, but just like a lack of fullness, right? Like we feel empty a little bit. And once we get here, because we're full, that question doesn't even arise. It's like somebody who is hungry will think about food, but somebody who's full will not think about food at all, right? It's basically that. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, let's do the next verse.
दृश्यते श्रूयते यत्तद् ब्रह्मणोऽनन्यत् तत्त्वज्ञानच्च तद्ब्रह्म सच्चिदानन्दम् अद्वयम्.
All that is perceived or heard is Brahman and nothing else. Gaining the knowledge of the reality, one sees the universe as the non-dual Brahman, existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute.
Cool. So, so here we are getting this, other sense, which is like, what I see, what I hear. These are sort of, objects that we perceive using our senses. And then here, all of those things is Brahman. Even though, there's different sounds, there's different sights, there's different smells. So this is like, applies to all of the objects, not just like, what is seen or heard, but even what is smelled, what is tasted, what is touched, all of those things and everything that we sort of get from our inputs. So our senses are inputs, and our mind is also some sort of an input. So we're getting thoughts, we're getting information from our senses, and we have our sense of memories, and information plus memory creates an experience for us. And what this is saying is that all of those things are also Brahman. Like they are also Brahman appearing as the sound, Brahman appearing as the taste, and it's nothing else. If we think that it is something else, we are deluded. So over here, if we think it's something else, basically means that we have a firm belief that, let's say, my boss said something really mean to me at work, and when he said those things to me, I felt really hurt, right? And that's sort of, now I'm back at home, and now I'm remembering that memory, and I'm feeling more miserable, and I'm calling my friends and talking to them and telling them how my boss sucks and how he should be fired or whatever, right? And what is happening in those moments is that I have a firm reality in this sort of experience that I had in the past. And by sort of reliving it, I'm recreating that experience for me in the now, and I'm feeling the exact same emotion that I felt when that happened, like let's say it was 2 days ago. And the only reason I am reliving the memory and I'm thinking about it so much is because I have a firm belief that that is true. The fact that he thinks I suck or something, right? And what this work is saying, that if you're thinking that, you're deluded, because it happened in that moment. Like information came, and from my memory, I thought I was a really good worker, and I thought I was a very good hard worker, but then my boss gave me contrary information, and that created some experience and a perturbation in my mind, saying, oh my God, my sort of belief in myself is now shattered, which has caused me to be very miserable or annoyed. And then a new experience has now, come into my system, and now I have a memory about it. And now I'm going back, going home or wherever I am, and I'm thinking about it now. So this new experience is now coming up in my mind, saying my boss thinks I'm a useless person, and somehow my sense of worth has reduced. And it's just it's just appearing out of my mind, right? Like it's a thought coming up, and I'm taking that thought to be real, which is I am useless. And that will create another thought. And this is how like the mind works, right? This thought comes up, and I take that thought to be real, and I'm like, okay, now I need to do something about it. I am useless. So I need to either start studying, bettering myself, right? So it's like, okay, I will not be useless. I will make sure, I will prove to my boss that I'm not useless. So I'll start to make efforts and do things, all based on a root thought in the reality that I am useless, which this work is saying is a false thought, because it is just some idea that we have believed in. So what if we can just stand back and just see that, okay, boss is annoyed, saying some stuff, passing by me. And what instead we can sort of, instead of being in the analogy of being in the river and being flown by the water, being thrown around by the water, we can sit back on the bank and watch the boss kind of talk about you in the same way. It's much harder to do because it's like they're talking about me, they're talking about us, but it is possible. And it's the same sort of mechanism that we can use to stand back and say, okay, boss is saying some stupid things, it's going away. But that doesn't mean that, there's not truth to it, or we did a project which was really badly done. And we can take that information and be solution oriented rather than, trying to improve this image of who we are. Like boss thinks that you are a certain way, now you think how the boss thinks of you is another certain way. So there's these weird images that we try to maintain, which this work is saying is not you. And we can learn to drop those ideas and drop those false understanding. And what will end up happening is we will start to see, okay, everything is just consciousness appearing. And if the boss is telling me something, instead of identifying as I am stupid, it's just saying, okay, project is not done well. So now I'll be more solution oriented to say, okay, now how can I fix the situation and how can I move forward? So it's always about it. Our entire world becomes about how can I be more solution oriented, and our sense of identity and all of that doesn't even come in. Because if somebody says, looks at, like, let's take a good like this example that my teacher also does. So it's like if you look at Ramya, and she has a video on, so I'm going to pick on her. He said, Ramya has 5 heads and 12 hands and 15 eyes. Ramya, how do you feel about when I say these things to you?
Like it's not true.
Right. But if I say, Ramya, you're so beautiful. Like, your face is shining so much today. Like, that dress is like looking like absolutely amazing on you. How do you feel now?
I feel awesome.
Okay, now if I say, Ramya, you're terrible. You're a stupid person. Like whatever you say makes no sense. How could you even say that thing the other day? So dumb. Like, how do you feel now?
I feel bad, like belittled. Yeah.
Right. But if we look at all of those 3 things, the difference between the first idea, the first thing of when I said something which was not true, was a deep understanding, firm understanding that it's not true. So you never took it seriously. But then the second and third, you took it way more seriously because our identification is with our mind. And if we break that identification, even actually the fact that you are beautiful and you're not beautiful or you're stupid is also not true, because those are judgments on the body and the mind, which are just appearances in our experience. So if we firmly start to identify with the context of the self, of the Atman, then that's how it's going to be. Where, like, if people tell you these things, you're going to feel the exact same way as like when I say you have 15 heads. And that's not to say that you become inert or insensitive. It's like you have a higher place to identify with. And we sort of have a direct experience that identifying with the mind and the body is only something it's like a burning piece of coal. It's going to eventually burn your hand. It may, in the beginning, it may seem nice. Oh, you think I'm so pretty? You think I'm so nice? You think I'm so smart? Oh, tell me more. I love getting a compliment. But what's going to happen is that because we start to identify with that, 5, months later, when you're not as pretty or when you're not as smart, and when they don't tell you that, you're going to feel miserable. So, it's the it's like you can't have the cake and eat it too, right? Like it's the same idea, which is if you take pleasure in compliments about your limited mind or limited body, then you're going to suffer when it's not available, because it is going to change over age, and time is going to change it, right? You're going to change, and your mind is not going to be as sharp, your body is not going to be as pretty. That's going to happen. So we will change the place of identity, and the place of identity becomes beyond mind and matter. And that's actually who we are. It's not even like we have to change it. We just have to see that that's actually who we are. And we had a false relationship, the false understanding of our mind, and a false identification with it. Okay, let's do the next verse.
सर्वगं सच्चिदात्मानं ज्ञानचक्षुर्निरीक्षिते अज्ञानचक्षुर्निरीक्षिते भास्वन्तं भानुम् अन्धवत्.
Though Atman is of the nature of pure consciousness and ever present everywhere, yet it can only be perceived by the eye of wisdom. Just as the blind do not see the resplendent sun, so too one whose vision is obscured by ignorance does not see the self.
All right. So this is also a question that may come up, which is, if the Atman is everywhere, why don't I see it? Right? And this is the answer here, which is, it is so obvious because it is everywhere. It is shining through you, right? It is you. So, but the problem is we don't see it because our attention is on something else. Our attention is on the stuff that we want to do. Our attention is on the things that we don't have. Our attention is on the problems we want to solve in this world. That's where our focus is. And that's basically what is sort of these clouds in the sky. So just like, if you want to see the sun, in order to be able to see the sun, there has to be a clear sky. If there are clouds, then we cannot see the sun. Even though the sun is there, we cannot see it. And what we have to do to see the sun again, the clouds have to part, or wind has to blow and move the clouds away. So that's the same idea, where right now, if I don't have the access, so it's like trying to see, I don't know if you've seen those, what are they called? Like when you have a face and a vase, it's like those, you either see a face in the image or you see a vase. It's like those double sort of things. I forget what the name of the thing is. It's basically like, comes in like magazines and newspapers, right? It's like a picture of like two faces, but then you can also see a vase in it. So you either see the vase or you either see the face. You can never see both of them at the same time. And it's kind of like that, which is, but once you see the vase or once you see the face, then you know that they are there. Until you have that, oh wow, now I see it. Until then you'll be like, where's the face or where's the vase? It's kind of like that. So it's like, once we know what the self is, that this is the self, oh, then we can never unsee it, because it's always there. It's always, you can always access it, because it's like, I guess the closest example I can say is like, if you suddenly wake up and say, I cannot see, even though you can see, but you're just like, no, I cannot see. What I'm seeing is not sight, it's something else. You've got this crazy idea that, your seeing is lost, even though you can see. You're walking fine, everyone is looking at you saying, what are you talking about? You can totally see. But you're like, no, I cannot see. Okay, I don't know where I was going with this, but the idea is that the sight is also kind of like the self, which is you're always seeing. You don't need to prove to yourself that you can see, or you don't need proof. Like somebody can say, I see this, and then you can say, I also see this, and that's how we have a shared understanding that we both can see. But there's no way for me to really know what you're seeing is actually what I'm seeing. Right? It's just through like language and shared understandings that we say, okay, we both have the same experience of things in this world. But there's no way to know that in truth. We have all just agreed upon it. My brown could be somebody's red. Like there's no way for me to even know that. But when I see this color, I can say, yes, it is red. And you can see it and say, yes, it's red, because language sort of makes that understanding, shared understanding. But in terms of experience, we have absolutely no clue. Which is why your experience of the world can be absolutely different than my experience of the world. We're looking at the exact same things, but we experience it completely differently. So this is saying that the eye of wisdom, which is kind of like, this metaphorical eye, which opens when we realize the self. And then once that opens, we know that everything is the self, and there's nothing other than the self. And then becomes, there's no problem after that. Like really, like whatever is in your life, even though it may seem shitty, it's okay. It's no problem, because the self, we have this deep understanding that whatever we see is the self and nothing but the self. And miseries happen, traumas happen, all of that happens. We know why people are acting out of the way they're acting. If people are being mean and giving us trauma, we know why they're acting, because of their experiences. They have led to believe that acting out in this way is the way that will make them happy, even though it's a false understanding for them. But we start to relate to people in a much more better way. And we can also have the ability to deal with trauma much better way. So somebody says something mean, we have the ability to deal with it. Somebody says something nice, we also have the ability to deal with it. So this whole world becomes easier to work with, and also we become more present to this world, because we know for a fact that thinking about some old thing or doing something in the future doesn't really do anything to us, doesn't solve our problems, unless we are consciously thinking of something and we want to solve a problem, but that's a separate thing. But living in the past or like worrying about the future, that's kind of how most of our lives, a significant amount of energy is spent thinking about those things, and that drops. Can you imagine a time when like we don't have to think about any worry about the future, even though we are living in a crazy world right now? In this moment, there's coronavirus, there's like, oh my gosh, like racism, and like, poverty, and like water problems and all kinds of things. But if we say in this moment, there's nothing, like we can live moment to moment. In this moment, I'm here. In this moment, I'm here. When a water problem arises, I will think about that. When somebody gets coronavirus, I will think about that. But in this moment, this world is perfect. And that's sort of the view that we want to develop. And that's what happens naturally once the eye of wisdom opens, because that is our direct experience too. Sometimes when we are really happy, when we're really occupied in some project, or we are watching something and we're so moved by it, our entire world disappears for that amount of time. All of our worry, and here the entire world, I mean like our world of worries and our problems and all of that. And when we go to deep sleep, our entire world disappears. Everyone loves to sleep. Like nobody here hates to sleep, right? Why? Because when we sleep, our world of worries is gone. So we know for a fact that we need a mind to be miserable. No mind, no problem. Let the mind comes back, we start to worry again. And because we haven't dealt with the fundamental part of the mind, which is we take it to be serious, and like it has like whatever it presents, I have to do something about it, rather than saying, okay, it's stupid thought appearing again, don't take it seriously. But moment it says, oh my god, think about the coronavirus, I have to think about the coronavirus. Like something says, oh my god, like think about this person who was mean to you yesterday, do something about it, we have to think about it. So like our mind is presenting these fears because it's gotten so used to believing in the reality of those fears that we just cannot help ourselves. It's like we just need to keep thinking about it. And this work is trying to break down our firm belief in our own minds. It's like it's like the mind itself will stop believing itself. There will be a moment, and that's when the eye of wisdom opens. And then every idea becomes kind of a little funny, because the world is pretty funny in many ways. And as kids, there's no problems, right? It's only once you look at kids and they laugh at anything. Anything is funny, and that's we go back to that nature, which is everything starts to become a little bit more funny and enjoyable. Even people's problems start, not, I wouldn't say like starts to become funny, but we see how because we have dealt with our own problems, we start to see what it is with other people and why do they take them so seriously. And it's the same reason, because we've all sort of believed and subscribed to like the reality that it should not be any other way. um, and like my teacher says, that God is smarter than us, and here God, I mean this intelligence of this universe. Think about it, like we are just a speck in this massive universe, and this universe is amazingly intelligent, and it knows how to operate. Let it operate, and we can just be a passenger in shotgun. We've got a shotgun seat in the journey of life, and that's kind of how we want to think about this. Any questions about this?
I have a question, but feel free to take this to the end if you want to.
No, let's do the question.
I'd love to hear more about how, I'm assuming that you have seen yourself in some way, which is why you're so passionate about it, or you're on a journey to see yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be nice for us to hear a little bit more about that. Like, are there things that helped you more? Are there things that make it more difficult sometimes? Like, just hearing your personal journey would be nice.
And then over here, what is it here? When you said it makes it more helpful, or it makes it more.
Oh no, I meant like just your journey to seeing.
So yeah, yeah, that's okay. I see what you mean. I would say, so the verse 66 is actually going to tell you what the process is. But basically, it is just that, which is immersing ourselves in this knowledge. For 27 years of my life, I was given certain ideas about how this world is, and that's a long time to internalize a lot of ideas. And in order to get new ideas and make that a reality, a lot of energy and effort has to be put in, and to break down some old ideas. And that's what we are doing. We are basically trying to break down old ideas that we have absorbed and we subscribe to. And that's a hard process, because it's if we believe in past lives, we can say it's lifetimes of belief, or we can say it's just this one life's belief. And even this one life is long time, right? So I would say what has helped me has been, doing the work, looking at every situation, and not being like, if something triggers me, rather than like running from it, I look at it as an opportunity to release stuff. Which is like, it's almost like I am attracted to suffering in many ways. Like a large part of my my past few years was like, I want to be attracted to suffering, because that reveals to me what are some of my things that I have to work with. And everything where I feel a little like, ooh, like there's this sudden like current of like either aversion or like any sort of negative feeling which makes me feel shitty, I spend my entire attention on it. So that changes life a lot, because things that are important no longer become important. Things that are not important becomes important. So it everybody's journey is going to be individualistic in that way. But a lot of things will start to shift our attention on things that I've lost, a lot of things that I used to love, but I've gained a lot of things that I didn't know I loved, right? So like there's a lot of shifts that start to happen. And I can say, and I think having somebody who, I think the most significant aspect of it was like having my own, having a teacher who has reached the end goal, right? Like, so it's not some hypothetical book that I'm reading and I'm saying this is the thing. It's a living reality in front of me. And I had that so there's that concept idea of like having faith that this is a possibility. So that's very important. If we I'm a huge skeptic, so like I was not like, oh yeah, I completely believe you. It took time for me to kind of even believe that this is a possibility. So that takes time, believing, because our minds, and we have all gotten, like, we are all educated, so we take things with a grain of salt and like verify and all of that. So developing that faith that, okay, this is a possibility, not constantly distrusting that, okay, no, I don't think this is true, this is all woo woo, or this is crazy. So that was an important step for me, where I was like, okay, I'm going to give this my all, because I know that this is a possibility. And then having access to the teacher, so like being able to ask these sort of questions, have him resolve all of my doubts. And then there's also this notion of like physical presence, so being in the presence of another person. um, it's kind of hard to explain, but they can show you the awakened state of mind. It's not a theoretical thing of saying, oh, you will it doesn't become about an imagination. It becomes like a direct experience, saying, oh, I am feeling blissful actually right now, and there's nothing around me that I'm thinking about. It's just coming from within. So once we start to have the taste of that, I think that starts to give us more energy and more power to say, okay, I want more of that. So that becomes, at least that became my new baseline. I was like, okay, I felt really blissful, I want to get back there again. So it almost becomes a sort of I would say, I wouldn't say addictive, because addictive has a lot of weird connotations to it, but I would say, why would I even want to do anything else? Like that's a lot of questions that we also have, which is like, okay, if I get this, I was like, why would I even want to do anything? Like, and in the beginning, that kind of is what ends up happening, which is like, because we have realized that, at least I realized that my energy was on all these other ideas. I wanted to become rich, I wanted to become famous, I wanted to become successful in career. All of my energy was there. But then a shift happened where I was like, no, I want, like, once I got a taste of this, I was like, why would I even care about those things? Like, those were so silly. And then all of my energy started to go inwards. And once that sort of started to happen, it's not that I suddenly stepped out of this world and, got all of my other desires went away. I still want to be rich, and I still want to, like, I still have those desires, but they're not as strong or as like important as they were. I can play with them now. I want to do all these other things. I also want to, like, I started teaching, like, doing this course. So there's these other desires I do have. Uh, but new things start to come in, old things start to go out. So this, I say that personally, life has become more of like this, like, roller coaster of like, or a ride, where every day something new happens, or like something, and it can either be boring in the sense that it can be mundane, but like my inner experience is never mundane. Like that's the best thing that's happened to me. I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah, no, that was great to hear. Thank you for sharing.
And to say that the end, I would say that this world is infinite. Like, I think what I've realized is, like, there is no set path or specific way that is like, everybody is going to have a different journey, like, and everybody has different things to sort of focus on and resolve and all of that, and everybody's journey is going to be unique in that way. But this, like the scriptures and the Vedanta and all of that, they are basically a bridge. So in one of the other books, Viveka Chudamani, which is actually the next book that we do in the series, which is like a more detailed work, which is in this book. So this book has like 68 verses. That book has like 570 verses, and it's very detailed about all of this stuff. It's the exact same thing, but much more detailed. And in the beginning, he says, knowledge of the self, reading scriptures is useless for the person who already has reached the self, because they don't need to have scriptures. They have become a scripture, right? They can just talk out of their own direct experience. And the other, immediately after that, he says, reading of the scriptures or studying of the scriptures is useless for people who have not realized the self. And then it's like, wait, what? Like, because people who read the scriptures, and if you have not realized the self, cannot understand what the hell this is talking about. Because you can read something, you'll be like, what the hell is Brahman, and what the hell is Atman, right? Like, so it can become very confusing. So both cases, it's not useful. Even for the person who has realized the self and for the person who has not realized the self. So it's like, who is this for? And then the answer to that is that it serves as a bridge, which is a person of knowledge or a person who has realized the self can help transmit the knowledge through this work. And that's the only purpose of a scripture. Like independently studying it is not very useful, because then we try to imagine and project our own sort of weird fears and joys on the work, and that's not useful, because then it leads to all sorts of misunderstandings. But yeah, that's the process. So we're going to do the next verse. So are we on 65 or 66? I forget. Okay. So if you do the 66, it's literally, what is the process? Oh, sorry, not 66. That's, oh yeah, okay, yeah, 66. Yep, let's do this.
श्रवणादिभिरुद्दीप्त ज्ञानग्निपरितापितः जीवस्वर सर्वम् अलमुक्तः सर्वणावत्योतते स्वयं.
The jiva, on being heated in the fire of knowledge, kindled by listening to the scriptures and so on, becomes free of impurities and shines by itself like gold.
Cool. So here, so kind of like what I was saying earlier, which is there is something within us that is gold, even though it may not appear as gold. It's covered in mud. It's like we're digging the earth and we find something which looks like mud, but within that mud there is this gold, and it's just hidden. And what we have to do is we have to like remove the dirt, maybe wash it all off, and then you're like, oh, there it is, there's the shining gold. And the gold was always there in that piece of dirt. The only problem was that it was hidden, like we couldn't see it. So the work that we have to do is to clean it, remove the impurities, and then we're like, oh, there is the gold. Or the other example is the sun and the clouds, which is the sun is always shining in the daytime, but I don't see the orb of the sun. I can only see clouds. And the process is to remove the clouds one by one, remove the clouds, remove the clouds, remove the clouds, and then you're like, oh, there's the sun. But the sun was always there. It was not that you had to, only by the process of removing the clouds was the sun created. The sun was always shining, always present. It's just that we didn't notice it before, or something was blocking us from seeing it. And that's the same idea. And the process is what? In the fire of knowledge. So what we're doing with studying this by this work and the practices that we're doing is we're starting a fire in our mind. We are given new ideas which start to burn some of the old ideas, and we're kindling a fire. And let's say my mind is focused a lot on what people think of me when I walk on the street. That's constantly in my mind. Even at home, I'm thinking about what people at work think of me, what my family thinks of me, everybody thinks of me. If that's my sort of how I spend my day, the problem there is that those thoughts are always clouding my mind, and my attention is always on those thoughts. So this fire of knowledge, what we're going to start to do is we're going to say, all right, I'm not going to think about those. I mean, I'm not going to think about it. I'm going to do something else. It's always useful to do something different rather than stopping something. So because by focusing our energy and thoughts on something else, if automatically our attention on these old things start to dissolve. So if I start to focus, let's say, on a cool project that I want to do, my attention on how people think I'm useless will start to fade away, because my attention is no longer on those thoughts. And one thing we have to realize is that our thoughts are constantly appearing to us because we have given it energy. That's the only reason why it's coming up. We have created energy. We have given them energy. If I think I'm a useless person, I have thought about that millions of times for it to come back again. So if I have a different thought, which is I am Brahman, or I am the universe, I am, complete, I am full. This is a new thought. I'm giving that thought energy. I'm giving that thought energy. It doesn't mean that this old thought is now disappearing. It's just that I'm creating new energy. Now what we need to do is we need to create such a powerful energy thought, and so much energy in this thought that it pales in comparison to this puny thought that I am useless. So we don't have to do anything to actually remove this puny thought. It's just that this new thought has become so powerful that it kind of dissolves this other thought or burns up this other thought. And that's kind of what we're doing. So the process is like, listening to, this course, or like, getting these new ideas, listening to a teacher. So that's the first process, just listening. And the second process is like reasoning with your own mind. We have to like look at this idea and see, does it make sense to me? Do I completely understand it? My mind, I am not my mind, I'm not my body. These are new thoughts that, have been given to us in this course. Does that make sense to me? My own intellectual understanding. And then once we have an intellectual understanding, we have to then in our own meditation contemplate and have like, our own sort of deeper reasoning, assimilation of these thoughts, where I can like just, think about my body or my mind and be like, yeah, I think I completely get the fact that I'm not it, So that's the three steps. First step is listening to it. Second step is just like, being able to like remember it and like work it out for yourself. And then the third is like it becoming a living reality for you. And that happens by like being sort of engaged in this work, and the knowledge is sort of, we're marinating our minds in this knowledge. And the more we do that, the more powerful the thought becomes. And the more powerful the thought becomes, the more, so it's called sort of this continuous cyclical process that we go through. So that's the work, and that's the process. I think the next one, next verse also talks about this. But any questions about that?
Thanks for explaining that. I just out of curiosity, what does jiva mean?
Oh, jiva is this limited individual that we think we are.
Thank you.
So like the ego, or this sense that I'm this person, all of that. That's the word we use to indicate that. Jiva. Thanks for asking the question. Sorry, I didn't clarify that.
So, Puneet, are you just kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about that, about these being bridges? Is that sort of saying that one inherently needs a teacher to be able to learn this?
No, it's not necessary. But most of us do, unfortunately, because so all of this work is, we're talking about our own self, right? So this work is not coming outside of that. Like this work is just a sort of language we use to describe direct experience of who we already are. But a very few people can actually get inspiration from themselves to be able to pursue down this path, which is why a teacher is important. It's not, so it's like, it's like trying to say, is it possible to learn the guitar by yourself? Sure, definitely possible. But if you go to a musician and they teach you, it's probably going to be faster.
Got it. Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's the same idea. So, not to say that you cannot do it, you can do it, but there's going to be more confusions. You may get some techniques wrong, and you may have to learn through like your own mistakes, right? Like if I learn the guitar, if I learn it by myself the whole time, then, I may have some incorrect techniques and that may injure me. And then I may have to like, correct it later and spend a lot of energy making the same mistakes that have been made because I didn't have like a mentor or somebody to like kind of, guide me through that process.
Sure. Follow-up question on that then.
Yeah.
I mean, we see tons of, I don't know the right term for it. I hope nobody's offended by this term, but I'm going to call them spiritual frauds.
Sure.
To me, it seems probably rather easier to know if somebody is a good guitar teacher for me than a good teacher for, realizing the self.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, any tips or ideas on trying to understand who is a good teacher for one?
Yeah. So Vivek Chudarabi, the next book actually has a section on like the qualifications of a fit teacher. So the first qualification of a fit teacher, according to this work with Advaita Vedanta, is that they are well versed in the scriptures, which is, they understand all the tools that is available in the work, and they can sort of unfold the tools to different people based on where they are. So like, I would want to give you the tool for subject-object discrimination, but like somebody else, I would be like, go do some karma yoga or something, right? Like they understand all the different aspects of yoga. So that's the first requirement. Second is that they are, they have had a direct experience of the self. And I think the third is like they're an ocean of compassion or whatever. Those are some, so this is, all of these things mostly come in order. So the first highest is like knowledge of the scriptures, according to this work. And then on top of that, I think my teacher says, we all need to have a good bullshit detector, which is, we should be able to call bullshit on people, on what they say and all of that. And one way to kind of build that is to see if a teacher talks about these three, I would say, major things: power, money, or sex. If the teacher wants any of these three things, so in the case of power, they're like trying to micromanage your life, telling you what to do, you should do this, you should not do this, blah, 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 run in the opposite direction. If they want large sums of money from you, run in the opposite direction. If they want to like have sex with you, run in the opposite direction. So those are primarily the three sort of major, I would say, like you said, the fraud gurus that end up, and what they end up doing is mostly these three things. And if you just get any inclination of these three things, run in the opposite direction, because though they're just taking advantage of you at that point, right? But the knowledge is free. The knowledge is available for everybody, and then the other aspect is, we also need to have like a connection with the teacher, like, and that's something which is very individual. Like, you may go to, I don't know, some famous teacher or something, but you may not feel like, oh, I didn't connect at all. But you may go to some obscure person and you may have this deep connection with them, and you're like, okay, this is my teacher. So like my teacher says, go where you're fed. That's basically how we want to look at this. And fed here means spiritually fed, where, my sense of connection with my own self is increasing when I'm in the presence of this person. If I'm not there, if that's not happening to me, go somewhere else. Keep, window shop until you find that what you're looking for. And then once you've found that, just go deep, dive deep.
Thank you. That's helpful. I like that. Go where you're fed. That's good.
Yeah. And I don't think it's worth building any fake loyalty or, that's like, I think this work, if we are serious about this work, we are doing this for the knowledge of the self. All of the other aspects like community and like these other things are side effects, and, they may happen or they may not happen. But if we get lost in the side effects, again, we're getting like, our mind is coming in between all of it, which is like, I want attention and I want, power and all of these other things, right? Which is what happens in a lot of large communities, which is, we go in for one thing, but then something else, we end up getting something completely different. And our motivations become a little bit corrupt because of that. But thank you for asking that question. Very important. Have a good bullshit detector. I think I like that. Okay, There's two more verses left. Let's try to get it done. Verse 67.
हृदकाशोदितो ह्यात्मा बोधभानुस्तपो प्यहत् सर्वव्यापी सर्वधारी भाति भासयत्यखिलम्.
The Atman, the sun of knowledge that rises in the heart, destroys the darkness of ignorance, pervades and sustains all, shines by itself, and also makes everything shine.
Cool. So here, again, a description of like what happens when the knowledge rises within us. And here the heart is not like the physical heart organ. It's the the center in us that makes us human, that makes us love, makes us connect with people. And that, once that sort of rises, or once that becomes available to us, then, all of our darkness that we have within us gets destroyed, or at least like we are able to deal with it a lot better. And here, like, what is it that sustains life, right? Like, why is life here on this planet? Like, there's some divine spark that is behind all life, and that is something that's within you as well, within us as well. And that's the Atman. And once we see that, all darkness is removed, and it doesn't need anything else to shine, because it is the cause of things to shine. And like, how do you know you are you? You're like self-evident. You know you exist. You're always on. And you don't need somebody else to tell you that you're awake or alive, right? It's a self-revealing, self-existing fact of moment to moment. Moment to moment, I'm aware, I'm aware, I'm aware, I'm aware. And that's self-evident. So there is a self-evidence of the Atman, the self-evidence of the I. And the same self-evidence in me is the same self-evidence in you. Same self-evidence in a plant, in an animal. It's the same Atman. And so that's the verse of the meaning of this verse. Cool. Any questions about this? Okay, let's do the last one. Ooh, last verse. Verse 68.
दिग्देशफलाद्यनपेक्ष्य सर्वगं शीताद्रि नित्यसुखं निरञ्जनं यस्त्वत्तीर्थं भजते विनिक्षिर्यः स सर्ववित्सर्वगतो अमृतो भवेत्.
Nice. I like what you did with the sandhi in the end, the amrito, even though it doesn't say that. Cool.
One who renounces all activities, who's free from all limitations of time, space, and direction, who worships his own Atman, which is present everywhere, which is the destroyer of heat and cold, which is stainless and eternal bliss, becomes all-knowing and all-pervading thereafter, attains immortality.
Wow. This is like pretty enticing. You're like, I want immortality. But yes, this is describing what happens when we reach the end. So here, one who renounces all activities, this basically doesn't mean that they're not going to do stuff. It just means that the sense of doership is renounced. So I don't think I am doing the work. It's the work is just being done. That's kind of how they feel, who are in this place. And then free of all limitations of time, space, and direction, the sense of there's only the now. Time exists only when we think about the past and the future. And this time is mostly like a concept, right? There's only moment to moment reality. And that's when time gets destroyed. because we are just living moment to moment. Space as well, which is, there is no sense of space. Even space is kind of imagined from a subjective standpoint. We can say, yes, there is another city, and there's another country and all these things. But in this moment, there is only this now and this, and all the space is in that moment. And sense of direction as well. There becomes no inside, there's no outside, there's only self everywhere. So even the sense of direction kind of goes away. And here, who worships his own or her own Atman? So there is this, we all love going to a temple, or we love going to church, or we love going to a mosque, we love going to all of these places of worship. And what this is saying is that there's this divine temple within us, or this divine church within us, that we can worship. And what worships? It's the mind which does the worship. The mind is like going and saying, I want to bliss out in this temple, or I want to bliss out in this church, or I want to pray. But once we see that the Atman is within, the divine is within us, then we will worship our own bodies, our own self. And the same Atman, like we just learned, is present everywhere. So not only can we worship our own selves, we can worship other beings too. And every person, you can bow down to their divine Atman as well. So, in India, we have this idea of like bowing down to every person. That's where this comes from, which is when we do namaste, or, the word namaste is basically, I'm bowing down to the divine Atman within you. Which is the destroyer of heat and cold. So this is kind of the thing where, we have these pairs of opposites that we call it. There's hot and cold, there's small and large. These are all sort of properties of the objects that exist outside, right? Something is good, something is bad. I like this, I don't like this. This person is nice, or this person is horrible. So all of those pairs of opposites, which sort of keep us occupied in trying to fix the world, that gets destroyed, because we see that they are all just name and form, appearing as Atman and appearing as Brahman. And it is nothing but a play of consciousness. This entire world is like a play of consciousness. For a moment, it is a tree, and then this tree will eventually morph and become something else. So it's constantly changing. So now it is nice, but tomorrow it becomes good. What is good tomorrow will become nice, day after. So things are constantly changing, and it's a moment to moment to moment reality. And which is stainless. So the stainless is what is full of stains. At least what our mind thinks is full of stains is all of the objects that we see. But something is stainless. Something within us is ageless, where we, even though I don't know if you've had experiences where, even though I feel, I'm getting older every day, but there's something within me which feels like I'm still that young, child, which hasn't aged, even though the body has a completely different reality, but like something within me hasn't aged at all. And that something within you is what this is talking about. There's this ageless and eternal aspect which does not change, and this eternal bliss is because it's always available if we can access it, and then becomes all-knowing, all-pervading, and here it means that what is it by which everything is known? What is it by which everything exists? And that is the Atman. I know that this is a laptop because of the Atman. It's in my awareness. Anything that I see in this world, anything that I touch is because of the Atman. All of the things appear in my awareness because of the Atman, because I am the awareness. And without awareness, there's nothing outside of this awareness. So it's all knowing and it's all pervading. So it pervades everything. This entire universe is also within within Brahman or Atman. And once we realize that, we are immortal, because if we identify with the context, our bodies may come and go, our minds may come and go, but the context remains. and that's how and that is immortal because it is eternal. It does not change, it is never born, it will never die. And this is not even that we attain immortality, it's like we realize we are immortal beings. It's just that our minds and bodies are the mortal things, which appear and exist for a while, and then they go back into this ground of being, consciousness. And so that's the end of this book. But as is the, I would say, I forget what the word is. Yeah, tradition. As is the tradition, we will read the first verse again. And the reason why we do that is because the work does not end here. Once we have finished the course, we have to do our own self-study, and we restart and we go through the entire process again. And hopefully when you read it on your own or like study it by yourself, we will all have like a better understanding of what this is. So the process is to immerse ourselves in these ideas, because the world will give us contrary ideas that you should be doing, you should be focusing on improving your the way you look, or you should be focusing on like all these other things. But that will never give us eternal peace or eternal satisfaction. And this work is saying this is going to give you eternal happiness and satisfaction. So cool. Let's do the first verse again.
Tapobhi kshina-papanam shantanam vitaraginam mumukshunam apekshoyam atmabodha vidhiyate.
I am composing this Atmabodha, the treatise on the self-knowledge, for those who have purified themselves by austerities, who are peaceful in heart, who are free from cravings, and are desirous of liberation.
Cool. So, yeah, that's it. That is the end of this course. Thank you all for making this happen. I hope this was useful. I actually hope that we had some time to just chat and just talk about how some more practical aspects